but Mr. Durst is present. Mr. DeGuerin is here. On the issue of the marital privilege, here comes Mr. Chesnoff. All right, here's Mr. Chesnoff and Mr. Lewis. So on the marital privilege, I would say that Mr. Lewin, I believe that you're 100% correct, but I'm not sure this is worth going into any further. I mean, I don't think it's that significant, but and it's time consuming. But I do agree. You are right. The Trammell case cited by Mr. Chesnoff interprets the federal rules of evidence. It just has no bearing. It does not. 971 of the Evidence Code, the spouse cannot be called by the adverse party to the other spouse. So here. There's a claim that Deborah Sheraton would invoke a privilege. I would overrule such a claim. I would enforce Mr. Durst's right to call Deborah Sheraton, as I must, to protect his due process rights. I'd have that obligation. There really is no good defense argument on it. But
we can eliminate this really quickly. I don't even have to ask Mr. Durst anymore. All I'm going to ask the court is, I'm going to ask the court to take judicial notice of the following: that under the evidence code, that the prosecution does not have a right to call Deborah Sheraton. As counsel is aware, and her...
That's it, right? And that's it?
No, but that Mr. Durst does have the right to call her, and she has no privilege to not to testify for her husband. That's
now, the only wrinkle on that is that you're right, you don't have a right. Yes, Mr. Durst does have a right. There could be some objection. I might have to rule. I mean, I'm assuming, I presume that I would overrule a claim of privilege. I don't know that. It's hypothetical. I don't know what the basis would be of that claim. So it's not that it's wrong. I'm just not sure that's appropriate for judicial notice, if you see where I'm going.
Yes, here's why it would be appropriate, Your Honor. Because, number one, that would only relate to once she was called as a witness, what the court would be able to control with respect to what she could testify to. That's number one. Number two, under the code, this is mandatory judicial notice because it's a statute of this state, so this is not even permissive judicial notice. So if the court agrees that I'm correct in what I'm saying, and I am correct in it,
you are.
Then all we're asking, and Mr. Durst, as the court pointed out, Mr. Durst brought this up by basically saying that he told his wife. Well, and as an offer of proof to the court, Your Honor, many years ago, I was in contact with Deborah Sheraton's attorney, and I tried to see if she would be willing to testify. She invoked her right, which is absolutely her right, and told us in writing that she would not testify in this case. I also discussed with her lawyer at the time, and I've discussed it with defense counsel, that I can't control, and we have no right, and Ms. Sheraton has no right. If Robert Durst wants to call her as a witness, she has to testify. Any invocation of any privilege once she's on the stand is a different issue. And then as a further offer of proof, there could not be a Fifth Amendment issue in any way, shape, or form regarding what Mr. Durst is saying he said to Deborah Sheraton. So right. That would be our position, Your Honor. We're just asking the court to instruct the jury. It's 10 seconds. That's it.
I will instruct the jury, but if you phrase, so I'll wait to hear from the defense, but my tentative would be you ask for judicial notice of that, and
that's what I'm saying. That's
and I'll do it.
Thanks,
so yes, Mr. Chesnoff.
We would submit, Your Honor, and we would also, at least I would, withdraw the issue about Ms. Sheraton and Fifth Amendment. There's nothing, now that I've researched it, I don't think that there's any issue with her asserting the Fifth Amendment.
Thank you. Fine.
Thanks, Your Honor.
Are jurors available, do you think?
They were.
Can I return to my seat?
You may.
Thank you.
And Mr. Durst is here, and we have Mr. DeGuerin and Mr. Chesnoff for him, and we have Mr. Balin, Miata, and Milius, and Mr. Lewin. Defendant's present. You may resume your cross-examination of the defendant.
Your Honor, pursuant to the prior discussions, we would ask the court to take judicial notice that Mr. Durst has an absolute right to call his wife to testify for him in this case. The people are statutorily prohibited from compelling his wife to testify as a witness against him.
Yes, the court will take judicial notice of the evidence code, section 971.
Mr. Durst, you just heard the clip that was just played, correct? Before the break, you heard that clip?
What clip?
The clip where you were explaining to Mr. Jarecki how you had grabbed Kathy's hair, and you were explaining that you had done that because it was time to go and she didn't leave. Do you recall that clip? I can play it again if you need it.
No, I recall it.
So, in that clip, would you agree that you said the following: whether I pulled a chunk of her hair out, and I remember grabbing her by the hair and coat, and her arm and the hair, and whether hair came out or not, I don't know, but I dragged her out of the house. That's what you said, correct?
I accept that that's what I said.
And it's very clear that in saying that, you are saying you grabbed her by the hair, and the only issue is, did a clump fall out, correct?
I grabbed her by the coat, and I grabbed her by the hair.
So would you agree then that your testimony on direct examination, where you swore under oath, you said that story was false, and you testified under oath that you had only grabbed her by the hat and the coat, that was a lie, correct?
No, that was the truth.
So the lie was when you told Mr. Jarecki that information, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, Mr. Durst, you've said before that the reason you were doing the interviews with Mr. Jarecki is that you wanted people to understand better who you were and what the real story was, correct?
Correct.
So can you explain to me why on earth you would ever agree to make up things that are not true that make you look like a violent sociopath?
I was finding that nobody wanted to do my story. Andrew said, the reason nobody wants to do your story is because you are not interesting. I, Andrew, can make you interesting and can find an outlet for your story, but you are going to have to say some nasty things about yourself.
So in essence, you did this because you wanted the world to get the true story of what happened, correct?
Correct.
But in doing that, you agreed to make up horrible things about yourself and then say them on video. Wouldn't that defeat the entire purpose of why you're saying you wanted to do the project in the first place?
Andrew assured me that he would put together things that would make me out to be a good person.
And it's your position that, of course, nothing that Mr. Jarecki said to you about telling you what you need to say, you're saying it's not in the film. He said that to you on the phone in other instances where it wasn't recorded. Is that your testimony?
Well, I don't know if he recorded it or not. I did not record it.
No, what I'm asking you, though, is you're admitting that if you watch all the video in this case, you're not going to see Andrew Jarecki saying to you, hey, Bob, you need to say really bad things about yourself. You need to make up that you were pulling out Kathy by the hair. You agree that's not in any of the video, correct?
I don't agree. I don't know what's in the video.
Have you ever seen that in the video?
No.
Have your attorneys ever told you, hey, Bob, we looked at the video and you know what? It shows Andrew Jarecki telling you.
Sustained. There was no answer.
I know, it's a question.
The question does not appear in the record unless there's an answer.
In the last quote, Mr. Durst, you admitted to being very, very angry with Kathy, correct?
I don't know where I admit being angry.
Well, the question was as follows. As we're sitting here, do you remember the feeling of walking into the house, of going to get her? Does that, and you respond, not Mr. Jarecki, you say yes, total anger. We're not doing this. It was me being the dominant one. And we agreed on 2 hours. It's going to be 2 hours, not going to be 2.5 hours or 2 hours and 20 minutes. It's time to go. You agreed to go. Let's go. That's what you said, correct?
That's what I said.
And that's how you felt, correct?
Correct.
And that's why when you look at that video, your response to it is you don't think that it's that disturbing because in the end, you think that Kathy got what was coming to her and she wasn't even really hurt, correct?
She wasn't.
I'm sorry?
It's no, I don't think the inquiry itself is compound. It's the object is compound, but the question is, answer the question.
Am I supposed to answer?
That's what the judge said.
So I did not feel anything about her getting what was coming to her. I felt that I was right and we left.
So, let me ask it this way, Mr. Durst. You felt that Kathy had broken an agreement by staying longer than the time she had agreed to, correct?
Correct.
And your view was that when she broke that agreement, that even if maybe it wasn't the best way to handle it, that it was not a terrible thing for you to go in there and pull her out.
Are we talking about how I felt 39 years and 6 months ago? Or are we talking about how I feel about it now?
Let's do both. How did you feel about it 39 years and 6 months ago?
I felt like I was right and she was wrong. It was time to leave.
And you felt that your actions were appropriate, correct?
Back then, I guess I did, yes.
Have you changed your mind now?
Well, when I look back on it, I acted like a real asshole. I should have let her stay another hour or two.
So, Mr. Durst, there have been 2 times in the last 2 days, once yesterday and once today, where you were asked or shown, either asked about the hair pulling incident or shown the hair pulling incident and asked how you felt about it, and your response was to say it was a bad movie. Do you recall doing that the 2 times?
I don't recall, but it was a bad movie.
Well, my question, Mr. Durst, watching that scene and being asked, how does that make you feel? And your response is to become a movie critic and say it was a bad movie? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So let me ask it again. Let me try it another way. So you're shown what, would you agree that what's displayed on the screen, was that pretty horrific?
Horrific to me is worse than what happened on the screen.
Okay, give me the word, how would you describe it?
What happened on the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, Ryan Gosling grabbed Kristen.
No, I don't mean to narrate it. I mean, if you were to describe it, not say, here's what happened. Give me a word to describe it. I said it's horrific. You're saying, no, it's not horrific. How would you describe it?
I'm not sure how I would describe it. I would say that
Well, you said it's not horrific, so I'm just, what's a word?
horrific seems worse than what I saw on the screen.
Okay, so what I'm asking you is, please, Mr. Durst, you're a smart guy with a big vocabulary.
Yeah, well, I'm working on it. I wish I had a thesaurus.
Well, go ahead, take your time.
Yeah, it was nasty.
Nasty, okay. During that exchange, you referred to yourself as the dominant one. Do you recall that?
Yeah,
And I'm going to get into this a little more in a moment, but Kathy was basically a kid, right?
basically
When you started, she was a kid. She was 19 years old.
19 when we met.
You were almost 30, correct?
When she went missing, she was almost 30.
No. When you guys started, you were 28, I believe, going on 29, and she was 19, right?
Correct.
You indicated in this same exchange, I don't know if you noticed this, did you know you said at the end of this, it's going to be 2 hours, not going to be 2.5 hours, or 2 hours and 20 minutes. It's time to go. You agreed to go. Let's go. And then you continued the same thing with having a child. You agreed that you weren't going to have children. You got yourself pregnant. You want to get an abortion. You can get an abortion. You want to have the child. You're going to get divorced. You equated, correct, your dominance with when you're going to leave certain events. You equated that with how you treated the idea of you guys having a child, correct?
Yes, you're reading it.
Right, and Andrew Jarecki didn't tell you, hey, Bob, can you please equate your physical violence with your control over Kathy relating to having a child? That wasn't his idea, right?
Correct.
It was your idea because that's what you thought, right?
That's what I thought.
You also said, you got yourself pregnant. Can you explain what you mean by that? What does that mean?
Kathy was in charge of birth control. If she got pregnant, she wasn't doing the birth control.
Kathy didn't, it wasn't like the Immaculate Conception, right? You got her pregnant, right?
Yeah, well, it's a bad sentence.
But your belief was that in essence, that's Kathy's responsibility. And if she gets herself pregnant, she better take care of it, correct?
Correct.
And would you agree that that was part of kind of the dominant way that you acted and controlled the relationship?
Well, she agreed not to get pregnant, not to have children.
Right.
When I look back on it, thinking that this woman girl at 19 could meaningfully give up her plans for her future seems ridiculous. Obviously, she was just saying, okay, let's not have children. That's what I wanted. But she was not accepting of it.
Right, but my question to you is not from her perspective, it's from your perspective of you're using the violence and you're using the pregnancy to assert dominance and control, correct?
Overruled.
I'm dragging her out of the party by her coat and her hat, and I'm insisting that she do with this pregnancy what she had agreed to do.
Have you ever, in any interview that you've given, have you ever expressed any remorse about the violence that you inflicted on your wife?
Have I ever expressed any remorse in an interview?
In any interview you've given with anybody about the violence you inflicted on your wife?
We're talking about the Christmas party.
Well, we're talking about any violence you inflicted on your wife. Let's put it this way. Was the Christmas party the only act of violence that you inflicted on your wife?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall when you were being shown this incident, when it was being discussed, have you said that that incident isn't even the worst? That, quote, there were a bunch of other times I would grab her and say, we're leaving. Do you recall saying that?
I don't recall saying that.
RD 051, 12-12-10, page 384, lines 7 through 10.
I will accept that I said
No,
it.
we'll play it. Thanks.
Your Honor, this was from People's 269, page 54 of the transcript that accompanied it.
And the hair pulling wasn't even the worst. There were numerous, I don't know, numerous, a whole bunch of other times I would grab her and say, we're leaving.
That's you, right?
Yes,
Would it be fair to say that your response was to be charitable, callous about the violence?
well, the other times, nobody made a big fuss about it. I can remember several times getting Pat Kathy's purse and coat and walking over to the part of the house where she was and saying, here's your coat, here's your purse, it's time to go.
Even during your testimony this week, when the issue came up, you would agree you had a chance to basically express some remorse, and instead you made a joke about it, correct?
I made a joke about it.
RD 720.
I apologize, Your Honor. One second.
While you're looking for that, may I continue, Your Honor, while Mr. Milius? I want to go back to the affidavit I asked you about a moment ago, the February 7th, 1983 document. In that document, you accused Kathy's family of not caring for her, not trying to find her, and of impeding your efforts to locate her, correct?
That's correct.
That was a lie, wasn't it?
No, that was the truth.
So, it's the truth that Kathy's family did not care about her and was not trying to find her? Is that your testimony?
They were not trying to find her. The part where they didn't care about her, that's wrong.
You previously been convicted of a felony, is that correct?
Correct.
And what was the felony you were convicted of, and when did it happen? The conviction?
I was convicted in 2003, I guess, in Texas. 2 counts of bail jumping, 1 count of tampering with evidence. And then, I guess, 2 months later, I was convicted of 2 counts in the federal system of transporting guns across state lines.
And then you were convicted in 2000, I think you entered your plea in 2016 to a felony in Louisiana, correct?
Correct, of a felon in possession of a firearm.
Several of those felonies involve firearms, is that correct?
Some of those felonies are what?
Several of those felonies involved firearms, correct? I guess 2 of them.
How could bail jumping involve violence?
No, firearms.
Oh, bail jumping does not involve firearms. Tampering with evidence does not involve firearms. The 2 counts of federal transporting guns across state lines, that involved firearms, but but the judge took notice of the fact that I had no intention of using the firearms. 2006, in Louisiana, I was convicted of being in possession of a firearm.
In 2006, did you mean 2016?
Yes, thank you for correcting me.
Did you tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth during your trial testimony in Galveston?
I lied in the trial in Galveston. I said I was in Northern California when Susan Berman was murdered, and that was a lie.
Is that the only lie you told during that trial?
The only one I'm aware of.
During that trial, you were questioned. This is October 28, 2003, page 54, lines 18 through 23. Questioned by the DA. It's hard to keep up with your version of the story, is it not, Mr. Durst? You answered, no, my version of the story, I don't have a version of the story, and I have not told any lies while I've been in this room. That in and of itself was a lie, correct?
That was a lie because I had told one lie.
And you told Andrew Jarecki during your December 13, 2010 interview, you admitted at that point, almost kind of bragged, right, that you had not told the whole truth during your Galveston testimony, correct?
I don't recall such a thing.
Sure, RD 239, December 13, 2010, page 766, lines 7 through 23.
Examine, this is from People 269, page 130.
At the time, you certainly have said to me that you did lie to the jury in Galveston in some way, that your lawyer encouraged you to. And I think
Well,
that's...
he didn't encourage me to. We went over the oath, and from day one, the oath says, you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Just make sure that the ones at the end tell the truth, nothing but the truth, that you do exactly that. In terms of the whole truth, if you want to leave out something which does not, which makes you look bad if you tell it, but does not turn into an untruth, well, try it. Try it. If there's something so terrible that you don't want to say it or you think could be construed the wrong way, then just leave it out.
Does that refresh your memory?
Yes, it does.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that in this statement you were explaining how you didn't actually lie in Galveston, you just kind of left certain things out? That's what you were saying, right?
Correct.
And that statement itself, when you were talking about how you lied, that was a lie itself, correct?
No.
Well, here's why what I'm asking about, Mr. Durst. What you said is you said from day one, promise to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Just make sure that the ones at the end tell the truth, nothing but the truth. That you do exactly that. You didn't do exactly that, did you?
One time, I lied when I said I was in Northern California when I was actually in Southern California.
If you had lied repeatedly in that case, would you tell me right now? Would you admit it?
Would I admit it? I was trying to think, why would I admit something that did not happen? I did not lie repeatedly. I lied once.
That's not what I asked you. I want you to assume for a moment that you had lied in other place in Galveston testimony. I just want to ask you, would you admit to us that you had lied?
I cannot assume something that didn't exist. It's like asking me to assume the earth is flat and then asking me where it ends. I did not lie, and I cannot assume that I did lie.
So you can't be asked a question whether you would lie about something unless the thing you had lied about had actually happened. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
So I guess, Mr. Durst, that's why you can tell us that you would lie if you had killed Susan. You would lie if you had killed Kathy. You would lie if you had killed Morris, because in fact, that's not a hypothetical. That's what you did. Overruled.
That is not what I did.
So please explain. You just told me a moment ago that I can't answer your hypothetical, Mr. Lewin, because it's a hypothetical and that didn't happen. Yet, you answered my hypotheticals previously before the break. I asked you, if you had killed Susan, would you tell us? You said no. If you had killed Kathy, would you tell us? You said no. If you had killed Morris, if you had murdered Morris, would you tell us? You said no. Now I ask you a hypothetical and you say, I can't answer that hypothetical because it did not happen. You said, yes, that's correct. So my question is then, by your own analysis and reasoning, you are able to answer the hypotheticals about whether you killed Kathy, whether you killed Susan, and whether you murdered Morris, because that's not a hypothetical. It's exactly what happened, and you know as you sit here, you know whether you would lie about it or not because it happened, correct?
It did not happen.
It's not argumentative. It's compound. You could ask it 3 times, each one individually, but you're not making that objection.
There was an answer, Your Honor, so I assume the answer could stand.
The answer may stand.
All right.
I'm sorry?
Move to strike it, compound.
All right, I'll strike it. You may ask 3 questions, but the questions are not argumentative.
Mr. Durst, you previously were asked before the break, if you had killed Susan, would you tell us? You answered no, correct?
Correct.
When I just asked you another hypothetical, your response to the hypothetical was, I can't answer your hypothetical because it didn't happen. So because your hypothetical didn't occur, I can't answer it. Do you recall saying that?
Yes.
So, Mr. Durst, the only difference then, by your own reasoning, would you agree, is that you were able to answer no, I would not tell you about Susan Berman, because in fact, Mr. Durst, it's not a hypothetical, it's what actually happened, correct?
It did not happen.
So can you explain, Mr. Durst, given your own statements, please explain how what I just laid out is not accurate? Tell us. We'll wait.
It's a conflict.
What does that mean?
I mean, there's a conflict between my saying that it's hypothetical. I can't answer it because it's hypothetical.
I see what you're saying, Mr. Durst, is that in essence, you can't explain the difference, correct? You don't have an answer to my question, do you? Correct?
A hypothetical, I guess I would have to say that no, a hypothetical did not happen, even though it's hypothetical.
Okay, so you're not answering my question, so let me try it again.
Object to that comment.
All right, rather than comment, just simply ask each of these questions.
Mr. Durst, you testified that if you had killed Susan, you wouldn't tell us, correct?
Correct.
And according to your own rules of analysis, that is an untrue hypothetical because you did not kill her, correct?
Correct.
And when I asked you another question, not about Morris, not about Susan, not about Kathy, your response was, I can't answer that. I can't say whether I would be honest about that or not because it's an untrue hypothetical. Do you recall saying that?
I recall saying it.
So the question is that if you couldn't answer the second untrue hypothetical, then how are you able to answer what you say is the first untrue hypothetical about Susan Berman by saying no?
I have to answer.
Yes?
Proper hypothetical and argumentative.
Overruled.
I have to answer the hypothetical. My answer is no.
All right, I'm going to move on. When you did not want to answer a question during your Galveston testimony, would you frequently respond, quote, "That question is not completely clear," unquote, or "I don't understand the question"?
I don't understand this question.
What I'm basically asking, Mr. Durst, is during your cross-examination in Galveston, when you did not want to answer a question, isn't it true you would say, "That question is not completely clear," or "I don't understand the question"?
When I did not understand the question, I would say I do not understand the question.
Have you ever used those responses?
Wait, there's a objection, yes?
Objection is improper predicate for the question.
I'm sorry, counsel, can you say?
Improper predicate for the question.
That's not an objection.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what it means. Improper predicate. Okay, hold on. Understand the question.
Plain sidebar, I don't want to speak the objection.
Overruled. Just overruled. Make a proper objection or it's overruled.
Mr. Durst, have you ever used the response, "That question is not completely clear," or "I don't understand the question"? Did you ever use those responses while you were in court testifying in Galveston as a means of not answering a question that you actually did understand and was clear?
Relevance 352.
Overruled.
No.
Isn't it true, Mr. Durst, that you have told potential witnesses, Susan Giordano as an example, that she should respond to questions I ask her by saying, "That question is not completely clear," or "I don't understand the question"?
You're asking me if I told Susie that?
Yep.
I did not tell Susie that.
Given your past lies to police officers, your untrue statements in sworn affidavits, your comments about your testimony in Galveston, your statements today that you would lie about questions about whether you killed Susan, whether you killed Kathy, or whether you murdered Morris. Since you are an admitted liar, can you explain why a jury should reasonably believe anything you have to say about any of those issues?
Objection upon the question. Overruled.
Your characterization of me as a liar is untrue. I tell some lies, but mostly, primarily, almost always, I tell the truth.
Mr. Durst, did you not stand up here before the break and say that you would lie?
During the break.
No, before the break. You would lie about whether you murdered Susan Berman, whether you murdered Kathy Durst, and whether you murdered Morris Black. You said you would lie about those things, correct?
If I had killed them, I would lie about that.
So the question is, since the jury is trying to decide whether or not you did in fact commit these acts, would you agree, Mr. Durst, that given everything you've said, that it would be very hard to make an argument as to why a jury should believe anything you have to say about those three issues?
I do not agree that it would be very hard to make an issue about whether I lied about those three issues. You are taking a minuscule list of things and trying to generalize on it and say I always lie, which is untrue.
Mr. Durst, isn't it true? You don't always lie. You just always lie when you are concerned about the consequences, particularly in the courtroom or to police officers, with if you tell the truth. Correct? That's when you lie.
I think that's a bad question. I have lied in the Galveston trial, what I just described. I don't know which police, I guess Michael Strook is what you're talking about. I told Mike Strook 2 lies over a long period of time.
You lied to Mike Strook. You lied to Andrew Jarecki. You lied in the Galveston testimony. You lied when myself detectives interviewed you, correct?
Correct.
That's 4 for 4, correct?
Oh no, it's not 4 for 4. In New Orleans, you asked me numerous questions, and most of the answers I gave you were correct and truthful. There were some lies.
Wait, Mr. Durst, is it your position that because you were honest about questions that were not that important, that somehow when we decide if Bob Durst is a liar, we add up the number of truth versus the number of lies, not the importance of the lies that are being told? Is that what your position is? It's a question of numbers?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So you just basically said that in essence, hey, I told the truth about a lot of things. You didn't say this, but as an example, you told us what your real name was. You told us where you lived. You told us where you worked. You told us about the dogs you had. Yeah, the whole thing about, you know, the cadaver note and where I was when Susan died, I lied about that. Well, if you add that up, that's like 5 truthful statements and only 2 false ones. That appears to be what you're doing now, correct?
It's what you're doing now.
No, I'm repeating, you said a moment ago, Mr. Durst, that you told the truth about most things, that I was being unfair because apparently you didn't use this word, but I'm like cherry picking the couple of lies you told.
That's correct.
So, do you believe that the lies that I pointed out are the material issues in this case?
Have I killed anybody is a material issue, and I have not killed anybody.
So, is where you were at the time of Susan Berman's murder a material issue in this case?
Yes.
Is who authored the cadaver note a material issue in this case?
Yes.
Is where you were, strike that, is whether you spoke to Kathy Durst on the night that you allegedly put her on her train, is that a material issue in this case?
Only because it's become a material issue.
Well, Mr. Durst, you're charged with a witness killing, correct?
I'm charged with what?
Witness killing. Susan Berman, you murdered her, and the charge is you killed her because she was a witness, correct?
Well, I'm not aware of that, but I'll take your word for it.
You're not aware, Mr. Durst, that there is a special allegation of witness killing involving your alleged killing of your wife, Kathy? You're not aware of that?
I'm not aware that I have been charged with killing Susan Berman because she was a witness. I'm aware that that has been alleged, but I have never seen anything that says that.
So the judge read to you, you first appeared in front of Judge Wyndham in November of 2016. Do you recall that?
November 4th.
Okay, well, you're one up on me. November 4th, 2016. And there was a complaint which alleged one of the special circumstances of witness killing. Are you saying you were not aware of that?
I was not aware it had ever formally been charged with that.
We've had, Mr. Durst, where you've been present, motion after motion, hearing after hearing, regarding the admissibility of that evidence. And you're telling me that despite the fact that you've done everything you can do to keep the Kathy Durst part of this case out of it, that you were not aware that you were charged in this case with a witness killing of Susan Berman relating to your missing wife? Is that your testimony?
My testimony is I was charged with killing Susan Berman.
And you were charged with killing Susan Berman. One of the special circumstances is that because Susan Berman was a witness to the demise of your wife, Kathy Durst, correct? You were aware of that.
I don't know what I thought about all that. That was a lot of legalese. What I'm charged with is killing Susan Berman. The fact that you're able to bring Kathy Durst into it and Morris Black into it just shows that the prosecution's lawyers have been doing better than the defense lawyers. I don't think they have anything to do with one another.
Gee, I don't know whether to object or say thank you.
If I,
Do not ask for a stipulation.
Mr. Durst, let me just ask this again as plainly as I can. You're a very bright man. Are you telling us that you did not know? I'm not asking whether you liked it, but that you did not know that there's a witness killing special circumstance in this case. Is that your testimony?
I had never heard that language until I got here in California. I'm aware that the penalty for murder is life in prison. The other stuff never seemed to make any difference to me, since they don't kill people in California. Life in prison is the worst that I can undo.
Right, but that's not what I'm asking. So are you now saying that you have been aware since you came to California, since you were arraigned November 4, 2016, you're aware that there's a special circumstance of witness killing in this case involving your missing wife, Kathy Durst, correct?
That's legal language. I don't know what a special circumstance is. I cannot be charged with killing Kathy Durst in California when everybody says that Kathy Durst disappeared from New York. I don't think you can charge me with killing Kathy Durst. I think that would have to be a New York district attorney.
All right, let me move on. Would you agree that the things that you tend to lie about are generally things which are highly incriminating if you told the truth?
No.
Well, so, Mr. Durst, have you ever heard of the term pathological liar?
Yeah.
Would you agree you're not a pathological liar? You lie about the things that matter and that might affect whether or not you're going to be held accountable for your criminal activity, correct?
I have a feeling that I'm not real sure what a pathological liar does.
Well, so the idea of a pathological liar, Mr. Durst, would be somebody that just lies about things for the sake of lying. In other words, you could ask them, what time is it? And they'll say, oh, it's midnight, when it's 6 a.m., and they just lie because there's no rhyme or reason to it.
I would agree that I'm not a pathological liar.
Would you agree that you lie about things in order to avoid negative consequences? That's why you lie, correct?
Correct.
Would you, most people, would you agree in your experience, most people don't just lie for the sake of lying. You can usually go, even little kids, you can go and find out, hey, why did you lie about stealing the cookie? Well, because they stole the cookie and they didn't want the consequence. You agree that's how most people work, right?
That's how most people work. I don't know how most people work.
Well, would you agree that the way you work is that you don't just make up lies for the sake of lying? You lie, in particular, when there is a reason for you to lie, and generally speaking, in this context, when that relates to incriminating evidence, correct?
Correct.
Would you also agree, Mr. Durst, that just in terms of your personality, that you tend to be very honest about things that are a lot of people would be embarrassed about? Would you agree?
No.
Do you remember during the March 15, 2015 interview that I said, Mr. Durst, you're honest in about 90% of what you're asked? Do you remember me bringing that issue up?
No.
RD001, March 15, 2015, page 12, lines 27 to page 13, line 10.
Exhibit. This is a previous one. This is People's 291, part of 291. Thank you.
And what really kind of caught me was that most people, when they're talking to anybody, I mean, police, family, etc., most people are very much concerned with what other people think of them. And so what will happen is that they will kind of make themselves out to be nicer, better, etc. And I noticed that with about 90% of the things you're asked, you are brutally honest. I mean, more honest than most people that I've seen, for 90%. But I'm wondering, is that something you're aware of about yourself in comparison to other people, or no? I mean, is that something, am I pointing out something that you ever thought about or was aware of, or no? Or was certainly aware of it?
Does that refresh your memory?
I think something comes in the next line. And you move the screen up.
We just have, it's just this clip, Mr. Durst. So does it refresh your memory about...
Well, yes, but I think what I said was more than what I'm seeing. I think I continued on.
Well, your attorneys will be able to bring that up on redirect. My question to you is, when I pointed out to you that, hey, you're honest about maybe 90%, but you would agree then that that means that you also lie about important things as well, correct?
I would agree to nothing you're talking about.
Okay. I want to ask you, is it fair to say that you spent a lot of time planning your testimony? Yourself, that you spent a lot of time planning, thinking about it?
Thinking about it.
In your direct examination, did you make a concerted effort, meaning you, yourself, to mention certain things during direct examination, even if they weren't necessarily responsive to the question?
Certainly some.
So, as an example, would you agree that you were talking about a typical day that you and Kathy would have in Vermont? You were talking about the activities that you did. Do you remember what you mentioned? Mr. DeGuerin was asking you, what you did, what was a typical day for you. Do you remember what you brought up kind of out of nowhere?
No, I don't remember.
All of a sudden, you brought up that you would cut up logs with a bow saw. You don't remember that?
I don't remember saying that, but we heated with wood, and you cut logs with a bow saw, and you use a splitter to splinter the log.
Right. You mentioned the bow saw, Mr. Durst, because you understand that you've got a problem with bow saws in this case, correct?
We're talking about Morris Black.
We're talking about Morris Black. We're talking about the bow saw unused, sitting in your car when you were arrested. We're talking about your story about New Orleans and dumping your car. My question is, do you realize, Mr. Durst, that bow saws and your possession of them is potentially a problematic issue for you in this case? Do you realize that?
No, I do not realize that bow saws had anything to do with Susan Berman.
Well, that's not what I asked you. You understand, Mr. Durst, that you are also, because of the rulings that the court has made, that it is relevant for us to be talking about Kathy and about Morris. You would agree that bow saws are extremely relevant to Morris, correct?
Well, I don't know if bow saws are extremely relevant with Morris.
That was one of the items you used to cut him up, correct?
A forensic said I did that. I have no knowledge of doing that.
So, I have no knowledge. Does that mean you didn't do it? Or does that mean you just have no knowledge of it?
Oh, the forensic said I did do it. So I have to accept that I did use a bow saw in addition to the axe that I used. But I have no recollection of using a bow saw.
I think in talking about bow saws and axes, it's a good time to break if it works with the court.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, now juror number 2, I wanted to chat with you, follow up with you on your note. So I'm going to ask you to remain, but we'll see you all tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. We'll see you tomorrow at 9 o'clock.